Hey everyone, I'm Heather, and I write books, I read books, and I talk about books, and today we're talking about book events that have gone wrong. And it seems like this happens so often, but today, yes, we're talking about Once Upon a Con. And this happened last weekend, August 14th to 17th. Actually, it was actually 15th to 17th because Thursday was canceled, but we'll get into that. So this was pitched as a fantasy book event, and it occurred at the Gaylord Hotel in DC, which is a beautiful hotel, but also incredibly expensive. And we'll get into all of that too. And that's a key point. So originally this book con was supposed to happen in Lancaster, PA. It was, announced at some point along the line that it was going to be at DC at the Gaylord. Now, we'll get into all the specifics, but Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, so Friday apparently was the busiest of all the days, but all the people that were signing up for the event, like the vendors and the authors, were told that 6,000 tickets were sold, and there was this big Discord that had the staff and authors and vendors and everybody kind of communicating back and forth, and so they were told, yep, we sold 6,000 tickets on pre-order, and that's an immense number of tickets. So a lot of authors were thinking about how many books should they bring to the event, because that's just a lot. So they were told to bring, I think, between 10 and 15% of the number of tickets that were sold. So people are bringing, like boxes and boxes and boxes of their books. Now, we'll get into the whole timeline of events too, but it seemed like Friday was the best for authors overall. In attendance was decent, and I'm hearing from so many different people that it definitely didn't seem like there were 6,000 tickets sold. It seemed way less than that. So authors were apparently selling, a decent number of books, but it definitely wasn't like 6,000 range. And also, everyone is saying that there were just two people in charge of this whole con, and then they had a staff of people that they brought in, but there were just two people that were considered like the managers of the convention, I guess you can say. So first, I want to talk about doubloons, and what the hell is a doubloon? Well, a doubloon was a little coin that the VIP attendees were given, and they were each given a certain number of coins, and then they could take these coins and go to an author and exchange the doubloon for a book. So the VIP members would show up with these doubloons, and they would hand them to an author, and the author would hand them a book, and then the author would actually be able to exchange those doubloons at the end of each day. So there's a couple things about these doubloons that are kind of crazy. First of all, authors weren't told about these doubloons. They just suddenly started, having people come up to them and saying, here's a doubloon, and they're like, what? Like, they didn't know what they were for. So I think that that's a red flag first, because that wasn't communicated out.
I went into this event not hearing any information about this. I had never heard any information about the doubloons. They were not included on the list of things that were part of the VIP package on the website. There was nothing. I'm not sure if other authors knew about this going in or not, but I personally did not. So when VIP members started coming up and handing these out, I didn't know what was happening. When I'm in stressful situations or just trying to go through events like this, I sometimes don't think critically in the moment. I am just rolling with it, and we'll deal with the repercussions later. So I accepted, I think it was like 8 to 10 of these on the very first day, which totaled amount came out to somewhere around $400.
So authors were taking these, expecting to get paid out at the end of each day, but it turned out that this wasn't the case, that they had to wait until the end of the convention to get paid. So someone came around and was asking for everyone's PayPal information, and they were filling it out and saying, okay, great, so you'll get paid on Monday. Monday rolls around. There is an email telling everybody that you'll get paid at the end of the week. Wednesday rolls around, and they're asking for everyone's PayPal information again that they already collected, which is very strange. And then they receive another communication that they won't get paid until August 29th, which is a whole like 2 weeks after the con is over. So the authors are starting to talk about getting lawyers and litigation because they're out a ton of money. Anywhere, I heard some authors saying like $80 to $800. Like, there are a lot of these authors that are out money. And what people don't seem to understand is these authors, buy these books with their own money, bring all these books and sell them at the con, but then they're out that money that they floated for this book, so it's crazy. Like, they should expect to get that money back. That's actually crazy. And they're waiting way longer than they thought they would to get paid back. So also, authors are mentioning that the authors that have already signed up for next year's event are already saying, like, trying to get refunds for next year. And that Discord that I was talking about, where the staff and the authors were all in this Discord, using it to gather information and to communicate, that whole Discord is gone. So they completely, deleted it. And if you go into it, you can't find any of the previous information that was discussed. It's just like been completely removed. The number 2 situation was rooms were not comped. So authors and staff and cosplayers that were actually invited to the event, they were told that their rooms would be comped. And obviously, we're talking about this now, so it didn't end up happening. No one got their room paid for. So imagine this. You spend hours traveling to DC. You get there, and you have all your luggage, maybe all your boxes of, books or whatever you have with you, all of your gear, and you're told that you can't check into the hotel. They have a hotel room for you, but it's under your pen name or something, and you have to put down your card, and you have to put your card down and pay for the room. And this, as I said before, this hotel is very pricey. It's about $500 a night. So the full weekend would be about $1,500. That's extremely expensive.
The staff members showed up being told that their rooms were going to be comped. They get there and they weren't. There was no room. And if they wanted to stay there, they would have had to put down their own credit card. So a lot of them left, meaning there was no staff working the event because they weren't going to pay the $500 a night fee for the Gaylord Hotel. That meant panels were going on without moderators. People were talking about sitting on the floor in these breakout sessions.
And it's an expense that they didn't expect to pay. Like, if you're not expecting to just pay $1,500 out of nowhere, like, that's not a reasonable expense to just throw out of, just to throw on your card. Vendors and authors and staff and cosplay artists were told that they would get the hotel for free. And not only that, their pen names and their company names were put down on the room. So when they showed up, they had to put down a real name with a real card for the hotel to have them on file. And when they did that, they were charged the money for the room. So like, they immediately were charged. Also, some people did find out later from the hotel that the rooms were canceled. So whoever had originally booked them and paid, I guess, or didn't pay or whatever, like, they canceled those reservations. So they were never planning on paying for those ever. The organizers didn't pay, and they weren't going to.
I'm with Goblins and Growlers. We were a vendor there. We were invited there. We were not only invited there, but we were told that our whole stay would be compensated. It would be free. We would not have to pay a single doubloon. But I keep hearing people talking about the room block situation. So something to know about me is that I worked for Marriott in the events department in audiovisual as a director and coordinator. So this is my world. When we went to go check in, instead of our normal human names being on the reservation, they had first name Goblins, last name Growlers. Okay, weird, not usual. Even the agent noticed that. Fine, we give our human names. Because we gave our human name, that then triggered one of their policies to where we were told, okay, human name fine, but now we're going to need to have the person, the card holder, the event organizers, validate that card. We were then told the reason why we didn't have rooms at first was the card issue, and then it was all of the rooms got pulled back into the general pool. Fine. I can maybe understand that at the moment. But considering that we basically had to pack up and leave Friday night because we couldn't stay and afford it and the con chairs kept ignoring us, I decided to go ahead and call the Gaylord, and I spoke to a sales manager. I told them everything that was going on, that not only am I familiar with this industry, but there is something about the way that our reservation was made was a little bit strange. Typically, when you are doing these kind of events and you have room blocks, yes, there are absolutely the discounted room rates. But for the most part, you basically have to send your information in. You have to give your real name. For an agent to see goblins and growlers, that's not normal. I suspect that they went ahead and booked ours, separately. Fine. There was a confirmation number. Easy to believe. But after explaining to the sales manager everything that I had already noticed, that were a ton of red flags, after my LLC lost a shit ton of money and started hearing more and more and more drama, I did call. I did tell them everything, and what she told me was that the con chairs went ahead and canceled all of the rooms. They did it themselves. They used the card issue, sure, but I am in the camp of believing that this was an actual scam, because from all that tells me, given that there wasn't really any food or beverage, that, there was definitely a lot of things that went wrong. One of the easiest ways to gut your event bill is doing things like this.
There were also cosplayers, as I mentioned, that were hired to come to the event under contract. And they were flown in, and from everything I can see, the plane tickets were paid for. But once they landed, they were essentially homeless because they couldn't, they try to get in their room and they're like, oh yeah, you have to put your card down. And you're like, excuse me? And some of them did, pay for their room just to realize that, like, I'm not going to get reimbursed for this. Like, I'm paying $500 a night, and you could use that money for that night and go stay at the Red Roof Inn, for the whole weekend for the price of one night at the Gaylord. It's insane.
Yeah, I was real excited about it. They contacted me a couple months back, telling me they wanted me to be a part of it as a cosplay guest. I was real excited. So a week ago, they told us that they had bought the plane tickets finally, because we're under obligated contract. So they're supposed to provide the plane ride to and from. They're supposed to provide the hotel rooms, and that's under contract. So naturally, I wouldn't think that there would be any problems, because now it's legally binding. It's not just somebody's word. Once I got to the hotel, I tried to do early check-in. So I tried to check in the hotel. They tell me like, hey, we just need a card to put on file. Now, the con runners, my contact was Kiri and Elena. So I'm like, okay, they did tell us they might need the card on file for incidentals. Okay, fine. So I give the Gaylord my card. My bank immediately calls me. They're like, hey, there's an unusual purchase in Maryland. I'm like, yeah, I'm in Maryland. They're like, yeah, but it's charging you $1,400. So I'm like, $1,400? I asked them like, hey, you guys tried to charge me for the room. And that was the entire stay. And they were like, yeah, the room hasn't been paid yet. So I'm like, the room hasn't been paid yet? I'm like, there's no card. They said it's no card on file or anything.
The thing is, these cosplayers were getting the runaround because if they thought that they weren't going to get reimbursed the funds, they would have just gone and stayed at a cheaper hotel. Like, wouldn't have you? But they thought that they were going to get paid back, or that this would work out because they're under contract. Like, there's a contract saying that you're going to pay for their room and board and food and like getting them there. And also, they also told the cosplayers that they were going to supply them with, I guess, the gear and the outfits. But then shortly before, they told that they weren't going to be doing that, and that the cosplayers should bring their own. And that's fine. That's fine, I guess. But that is something to switch around at the last minute if someone wasn't, ready to like dress like whatever, character you wanted them to be, when they originally didn't intend on doing that. So it's just so silly because they could have stayed at a cheaper hotel if they would have just been told from the beginning and not given the runaround. everyone would have saved money and it would have been way more sane. Just say, hey, we're not comping rooms anymore. We need you to stay at this hotel down the street. It's much less expensive. Sorry about the confusion. But also, then again, that works out in some of these scenarios, but there's a contract in place for some of these individuals that they signed a contract saying that they would pay for their room. And then when they don't do that, they're backing out of this contract. It's a signed legal agreement. So I don't know why they would even do something like that. I think it's incredibly stupid. Next is the whole vendors and authors setup debacle that I've been hearing about. So they were originally supposed to have Thursday, to set up and get everything ready, which would have been great if they had that day. But apparently the day before there was another convention, so things ran over. And so it turned out that they didn't have Thursday anymore, to set up. And a lot of them were like, okay, that makes sense, whatever. So they had to get in there really early on Friday to set up. And so some of them did do that, but then there was just like so much confusion with like the whole logistical process of setting up. It sounded like it was so annoying.
So a couple of vendors leave because now they're only allowed to load in the morning and they don't think they'll have enough time to set up. I get there at 8 a.m. on Friday to load in, and they tell us very strictly, do not leave your car and load in because the Gaylord has had problems before with people just leaving their cars, so do not leave your car, unload your stuff, get out. And that was the plan. I was going to drop off my stuff at my table, not even set it up, and go back, take a shower, and get ready for the day. It's 8 a.m. The con doesn't start till 12. There's no reason for me to be there for 4 hours. I get there. There are no tables set up. There are no, half of them were set up for the author side. The other half were a concept. The first half have chalk numbers and they all stop at J and I'm K. I see people scrambling. I see authors just grabbing tables. I'm not sure what's happening. Half of them don't even have cloths on them at this point. They're still setting up an entire row. And then the con chairs summon all the authors together. They say that everything's gotten pushed back. They're trying their best. There's a lot going on. I get it. I was like, yeah, totally. This is your first convention. Shit happens, shit hit the fan, obviously. What can I do to help? I kind of got ignored because they were just trying to problem solve, so I'm not super irritated about that. But I told them, like, hey, to dispel some of the anxiety about it, maybe we should load our stuff into the wall and then just have them set up the tables and everybody just stop for a second. They go, yeah, that's a good idea. That did not happen. Everybody keeps going in pandemonium. Everybody's yelling. Everybody's pissed at this point. In the background, what I didn't know what was happening was the staff was getting denied their hotel rooms. So not only are they trying to figure out the logistics of everybody having tables, they also don't know where they're going to be staying tonight. And this poor man, I have no idea who he was, but he was very clearly overworked and running around basically in tears because he had no idea what was going on. Everybody's yelling at him, literally just him. And I say, hey, okay, what can I do to help? Where should I go? Should I help you set up tables? What do you need from me?
So they get there in the morning and they have all of their boxes, like I said. Also, they couldn't park in front of the Gaylord. They couldn't leave their cars, so they had to get there to the front, take all their stuff out, and then immediately move their car. And if anyone's ever done any sort of tabling or anything like that, and I do that with the museum I work with, and sometimes you have a ton of stuff. I can't even imagine being in that stressful situation where you're like, okay, I gotta move my car, I gotta put all my stuff, I don't want anybody to touch my stuff. What if you're alone? What if you have no one with you? How completely anxiety inducing that would be. So when they get to the actual room where they were supposed to set up, there were just missing tables. There were no tables set up. There was barely any tablecloths. It was just seemed like it was insane. Everyone was getting more and more mad. And also the poor staff members that were on site during this time, oh my gosh, I feel for them because they had just shown up from who knows where, knowing that they weren't going to get their hotel paid. They had nowhere to stay. They were essentially homeless. This con left them homeless in DC and said, figure it out, and then they also left them at the will of figuring out why none of the tables were set up or anything like that. So the limited staff that was actually on site Friday morning was so overwhelmed. A lot of staff didn't even, stay. They walked in, they found out their room wasn't being comped, and they just couldn't afford to stay for the weekend. So they were like, see ya. If you're going to work an event, you would expect that you wouldn't have to pay for the room because you're spending your time working for the event and giving back to the event. Like, that's just insane to me. They were not taken care of. The staff was not taken care of either. So now let's put this in perspective. Authors are showing up with like 200 to 500-ish copies of their books. That's a dang load of heavy stuff to be carrying around. And then they get the run around when they're trying to unload, and they finally get their stuff in this room. And you get all your stuff in this room just to find out, you know, this chart that you were given about where your table is, it's just not there. So you have nowhere to put your stuff. If I was a vendor, I would have left. And there's a lot of vendors and authors that showed up during this time that were like, I'm done. I'm leaving. Because they saw the writing on the wall and they were like, this place is just, this is bad. Like, this is going to get worse. So they just left. The whole setup sounded so incredibly stressful. And also, vendors were leaving because they didn't think they had enough time to set up their table before it started. And so they were like, if I can't set up and, you know, make a good presentation of my table, I'm gone. And so people left. Not only that, I also was thinking about this too, but the staff shirts were apparently lost in customs or something like that. So the staff never got t-shirts, so you couldn't tell who was staff and who wasn't. And it just sounds like such a confusing mess. This is a fourth thing that happened and went wrong. So there's a flower crown panel that happened, and this poor person, you know, submitted this panel suggestion, and they got an email back saying, yes, your panel suggestions are approved, but they didn't tell them which ones. And so they were like, okay, because they pitched multiple panels.
This is the conversation that I had, is that I was trying to confirm panels from the beginning. I got an email only saying my panels were selected, not which ones that I submitted. And trying to communicate with the other con chair, who has now stepped down, was rather challenging. And it was only through that I even found out the Monday before the con that I was running the flower shop, the flower crown. It was sold out, and it was something that I personally was looking forward to. I thought someone else was running it. I'm like, oh, maybe I can learn a new technique. However, it was sold out and people paid for it. It was $10 a person that they paid for. And in my original pitch for the workshop, which I never received any confirmation about, never got any email about, which I talked to the other con chair here, I sent an email about that I'm still willing to do it, but they need the materials. And I only found out they didn't buy the materials. They didn't talk to me. And this was the original response. And again, my entire ethos, like the rest of the con, is people paid for this and it's sold out. So I'm going to do my best and I'm going to provide it. And I said, it's like in the original pitch was you guys would provide the materials that I gave an extensive list for, that I re-gave again. And then I would provide the tools such as the glue guns and the glue sticks, which if you were at the convention, I brought. I bothered them all week about the status of the flowers. And here you can see the messages that I had with one of the con heads during the actual convention, trying to, like during the actual panel and workshop, trying to understand what's going on. So the fact that she was telling people that I did not provide the material and there was a miscommunication about who would provide it, there was no miscommunication. There was no communication.
So apparently this flower crown panel, people paid $10 to make a flower crown. And the agreement in the pitch was that the con would supply the flowers, and this individual who pitched this would actually supply all of the gear to put it together, like the hot glue guns, whatever you need to make a flower crown. They were going to do everything else. That seems super freaking fair, you know? The thing is, though, the con never ended up ordering the flowers. It's like they never even thought that they needed to, I guess, but it was part of the agreement on doing the panel that they buy the flowers, not the person doing it. So this sounds like incredibly bad communication, and apparently there's a lot of people that were just like ripping apart the person who put together the panel, but it is not that person's fault. The person's name is Comic Canary, and they had nothing to do with the bad logistical situation, and they were just trying to put together a really cool panel, and it seems like bad communication on the part of the con. Also, be clear when you're saying which panels you're accepting. Like, say, oh, we're accepting your flower crown panel, but with a few alterations. Like, they should have mentioned that. I bet they didn't look at their panel closely enough to understand that, you know, they would be responsible for buying the flowers and ordering them and all that kind of stuff. A lot of people are mad at Comic Canary for no reason, and it's just like not their fault. So we can all just stop doing that, because obviously it's clear that it was the con. After all of this shit happened, like, it's clear that it was the con. Next, we have the whole plushie debacle. So apparently there was this plushie named Penelope the Penguin, and it was like this like mascot created for the con at some point, and they got an early kind of rendition or example of this from Squishables, and so they were like, oh, here's a Squishable and you can pre-order it, and it was somewhere between $25 and $35 to pre-order this Squishable. Well, turns out, like, when everybody gets to the con, they realize, oh yeah, this Squishable is stuck in the Atlantic somewhere because of customs and tariffs and etc., etc. They were just pulling stuff out of thin air. Like, none of this made any sense, but they were making this excuse saying, oh yeah, you'll get your Squishable after the con is over. Come to find out, this Squishable was never ordered. Like, they never actually placed an order for the Squishables. So people paid money for this, and they're never going to get it. So when is the con actually going to tell people, oh yeah, we're refunding you your money because there's actually no Squishable that exists? Like, this custom Squishable that we created doesn't exist. There is a creator on TikTok called Endelian, and they're super cool, and they reached out to Squishables to see, like, what's the deal? Like, was this Squishable ever ordered? And it turns out it was never ordered. You know, it was just, they got an early prototype of Penelope, and then they never went through with an actual order. So why is the con pretending like these were stuck in the Atlantic? They're not. That is such a lie. So if they're lying about stupid Squishables, what else are they lying about? Then it comes out later, August 21st, that the con never met the pre-order minimum, so they didn't actually, you know, place the order for them because they didn't meet the minimum or whatever. I don't know, that seems like an excuse, because if that was the case, why didn't you just say that from the beginning? Why did you talk about it, the boxes being stuck in the Atlantic or whatever? Like, whatever, like, that's not real. Like, poor Penelope's out there in the damn ocean. It's not true. Like, why are we doing this? Why are we doing this? Next, the fantasy ball and the themed meals. They were told, you know, they were going to have an amazing, you know, fantasy ball. There was a masquerade ball on Friday night, and then there was a beautiful fantasy ball that was slated for Saturday. So, thing about this ball is, the one on Saturday started almost 2 hours late. And there was no decor and wine. And this is really part of the con's problem, but the hotel is incredibly expensive. It's a resort hotel. So the wine was like $16. Every convention I've ever been to has free water and like refreshments. Like, I'm just baffled that wasn't a thing here. Also, in the middle of the fantasy ball, they did some sort of like teach you how to ballroom dance, but they didn't have the right music playing, and it was just kind of weird because it was right in the middle of the event, not at the beginning. So it just seems like it was just thrown together and they didn't even really try. But then they were playing, you know, ballroom kind of music, sort of. But then at the end, they like played, you know, normal, you know, dance music. And so people were kind of like, whatever, it was fun. But then there were some people that went there to ballroom dance because it's a freaking fantasy ball. And the carpets, you can't really ballroom dance on carpet. And also the music that was playing, they said they couldn't dance to. It just wasn't right. So it was just a bust. However, I will say the outfits were amazing. Everyone looked so cool. And they were wearing like beautiful dresses and outfits. So at least people got to dress up, and that sounds like fun. So people made the most of it, you know, showed up, did some dancing or whatever, and then would go out to dinner and try to save money on food because apparently there was just like no food. So these themed meals that were supposed to happen, yeah, no, none of that happened. As far as I heard, I don't hear anything about food at this event. There was a cafe, and apparently the cafe was stocked with stuff from the staff. Like, the staff was providing like going out and buying food for the cafe. A lot of people were hearing that because in this cafe, it was supposed to be like, also, all proceeds go to Make-A-Wish Foundation, but people reached out to Make-A-Wish, and Make-A-Wish was like, we have no affiliation with this event. We had no idea they were doing this. Like, what? They had no idea this was even happening. So were they ever intending on giving the proceeds to Make-A-Wish? I don't think so. Okay, so then the whole thing with Lancaster happening. So, originally the con was supposed to happen in Lancaster. But why didn't it happen? They were saying, oh no, something unforeseen happened and we can't have the event in Lancaster. Well, it turns out it was canceled by the con organizers. They canceled the con at Lancaster. They canceled the event. So they're acting like it was something out of their control. It was just a very strange thing to lie about. Like, why? Why? Did you need more space? Did you need a different venue? You switched venues. Just be upfront. Like, why are we lying? Like, what's the reason for that? I don't get it. Also, there were canceled panels all over the place. Canceled events all over the place. It was very unclear where you were supposed to go to. Signs were non-existent. There were these digital displays outside of each room, but they just said, once upon a con on them. So they weren't utilizing those digital displays to show like what was happening in the room, which is very silly. Every con I've ever been to, every conference, every convention, you have to clearly label the rooms. It's just freaking... That's like step 2, step 3, in setting up for the event is label where things are happening. You have to have signs. You can put in a brochure or put on the app or put on the website where everything is, but you need to label things because people don't always have access to those things. Just label the door, like it's not hard. And also the fact is a lot of the panelists weren't there because they couldn't afford the room, fee, and they had to leave. So a lot of them were only there for a day or two because they could only afford to be there for a day or two. Or they showed up and they had to leave right away because they couldn't afford it. It's insane. So one panel actually was in this one room, but when they got to that room, there was like something being set up there that was totally wrong. So they were like, whoa, we can't have our, panel in this random room. So they ended up having to go to the tabletop gaming room. And apparently the nice people that were there, everyone had lots of fun in the tabletop gaming room because apparently the people there were really cool. So that's a good thing about the con, but it had nothing to do with the organizers. It was the people who were in that room. Made it fun, and brought their own games. So that's cool. So they were like, yeah, you can just set up in the back of our room. So last minute having to change a panel. And also there was a lot of situations where, obviously staff wasn't there, like, cause they were like literally being drowned because everyone left, there was like, they were dropping like flies. Staff, authors, everybody was leaving as the event went on longer. So like there would be nobody moderating a panel. It was just, the people on the panel, if you're lucky, 1 or 2 of them. So a lot of things had to get canceled because, it just like people just weren't there anymore because it was so badly organized because of the freaking room situation. Like, I don't think the organizers really understood the domino effect of not sticking to, the plan and paying for the room. And, why would they do that? Because people are going to leave and then you're going to have panels canceled. You're going to have things go wrong because your staff isn't there. Like, what are we doing? Just so you know, they're selling tickets for next year. Anyone want to go? No, I don't want to go. I live fairly close to DC and I will not be anywhere near that. Anywhere it's happening. I live in Pennsylvania. I will not go to that thing. No way. And no one I know will. And on the 18th of August, they sent an email apologizing, for the issues. And they said that, the couple of people who are in charge of everything, they're stepping down and they won't be associated with the event next year. But I think like they didn't address all of the issues in this email. It was just kind of like, whatever. You just want to make more money next year. Well, you're going to have to pay back all of the authors that you owe. You're gonna have to figure out how to pay everybody back for the squishables. You're gonna have to pay everybody back for the rooms that they paid for when they were contracted, not to have to pay for the room. Like, it's just crazy. It's crazy. And I wanted to end this video by showing you a TikTok. Someone named Bunny Bubblegum, who seems like such a sweet person, was a staff member at the event. And you should definitely go follow them on TikTok.
If you're at Once Upon a Con, it's a mess. If you're thinking of going to Once Upon a Con, it's a mess. Everything's a mess. They're trying their best, but since Thursday, it's been a mess. Friday is also a mess. Information is few and far in between. Everyone's trying, but it's a struggle. It's a struggle for everyone involved. It's a struggle for the attendees. It's a struggle for the staff. I'm glad people are still managing to have fun, and of course the vendors make money. Please buy their stuff, because they're trying to. We're all trying, and I don't know what it is about book cons. It's like they're cursed. It's like a prophecy.
They were so incredibly overwhelmed and upset when everything was, going wrong at the con, and they were afraid of backlash, from the organizers or somebody else. And I think they're the coolest person. And because they tried to hold things together as much as they could, the whole reason why that con didn't fall apart and burn completely is because of the staff that were doing everything in their power to hold the ship together. Like, they literally did everything they could, but they had no support from the leadership, and they were kind of like doing everything on their own. Like, whoever the staff person was that stocked the cafe, like, out of their own money, like their own bank account, like, wow. They didn't have to do that, but they felt the need to. So yeah, this whole thing is terrible. I think it comes with this like notion where people who have never organize an event like this are suddenly saying like, oh yeah, we can put together an event. That's easy. It should be fine. It's very telling when the people that organize these don't have any idea what they're doing. Everything seemed to be wrong with this event from top to bottom. There's more things I didn't mention, like the badges were made of paper. I've never gone to a con with the badges made of paper. The badges don't need to be pretty and whatever. Just get a little piece of laminate, paper with a hole at the top. It's got to be laminated though. Or put a little piece of paper inside of a badge holder. Imagine that. And then you just give them that in a string and say, here you go. Like, I go to a con that's been going on since the 90s, and that's what they do. And they put a little logo on it and they make it different every year. And I always keep my badges. They don't have to be that fancy. It's just, you don't have to do something crazy. But I'm going off on a tangent here about the badges. But what I'm saying, like, there were so many things, little things and big things that went wrong with this. But it all circles back to, like, they made all these promises and they were just, like, not kept. They were not kept. So if you're going to tell someone that you're going to pay for their room, you have to pay for it. I don't understand why these first-time con organizers are thinking that they can do that. A lot of first-time cons cannot afford to comp rooms. That's okay. It's okay. If someone wants to go to a con, it's their own, volition if they want to pay for the room in that case. It's just, if you're a first-time con, be realistic about what you can accomplish. Can you do a con for 6,000 people with no experience? No, you cannot. No, you cannot. Start in a small town. Start with a good venue with, have people there who know what the hell they're doing, who have done event planning. I feel like these people are just like thinking like, let's have a beautiful, weekend with our friends. And they put together this whole con, and it seems like it's just for them and their friends. The organizers, the two people that were in charge, I don't know their names. I don't know anything about them. I didn't even look into them. I don't care. But those people who are in charge and their friends, it seems like they just did this for them. Like this whole thing. It just seems so, so silly. Like, it's just like a bait and switch. It keeps happening more and more with these bookish events. And it makes me like kind of afraid to go to a book event anymore, because I'm like, what could go wrong here? If I travel and I spend my time going to some place, like, is it going to be a complete train wreck? Like, you know, like it seems like every book event that's happening, you know, and it doesn't have to be like that, because like I said, I go to a con every year in my city, and it's been going on since the 90s, and you have people in charge who know what they're doing, and there's free food and free drinks, and and the tickets are incredibly inexpensive, but you have to be realistic about what you can accomplish with your con, and you cannot go outrageously insane. Ugh. Let's wrap up with another word from Bunny that I really, really like.
My first video got more eyes than I was expecting. I recorded that Friday, right in the middle of a Once Upon a Con staff shift. I was overwhelmed. A lot was happening. Part of me was worried that this stuff going wrong at the con would be blamed on the staff. The staff really were trying our hardest, especially other people. I tried as much as I could. I had to leave Saturday because of the hotel issues. Some people spent a lot of money and a lot of time to make that con work for all the attendees to get something out of it and to help the staff that were still there survive. I posted it after Friday because I guess I was scared that someone would see it and retaliate or be angry at me for speaking any sort of truth, but it's a mess. It was a mess. My main thing about that video is just don't be angry at the staff, and I've noticed a lot of people aren't. We had no control over a lot of the things that went wrong. We were trying to put out fires as we found them. It was just one of the worst convention weekends I've had. Not because of the con itself, because the things I did that were fun because people put effort. And I mean people by the vendors and the authors and people who did panels. I'm not referring to the con chairs. I don't know what they were doing. Whatever they were doing wasn't working. Anyone who enjoyed anything about Once Upon a Con, it was because of sacrifices from the staff. Not the con chairs, the staff. And at the end, they got screwed over for it.
So thanks everyone for watching this whole YouTube video. I really appreciate you. I am a new YouTuber. I have no idea what the heck I'm doing. Feedback is very appreciated. If you could like the video, if you like this kind of video, can you subscribe to me? I'd really appreciate it. And if you like this kind of content, feel free to subscribe. I post every Thursday and Sunday, all about book drama and book event drama and stuff like that. But just keep reading books, writing books, playing games, watching movies, whatever you enjoy, however you enjoy stories, keep doing it. Bye.